Marcus stood at the edge of the training field, his weathered hands gripping his worn longbow. The morning sun cast long shadows across the castle grounds as dozens of young soldiers practiced their archery nearby. Their arrows flew straight and true, hitting targets with precision that would make any commander proud. Yet none of them knew the secret that weighed heavily on Marcus's shoulders. At 52 years old, Marcus had served as a royal guard for over 3 decades. His broad shoulders and steady gait still commanded respect, but his eyes held a sadness that few understood. While other guards boasted about their sword skills or horseback riding, Marcus rarely spoke about his abilities. He preferred to watch from the sidelines, offering quiet advice to struggling soldiers when no one else was looking. The kingdom of Aldermere had always prized archery above all other military skills. Their mountain borders required defenders who could strike enemies from great distances, and their hunting traditions demanded accuracy that bordered on the supernatural. Every guard was expected to demonstrate exceptional marksmanship, and those who failed faced ridicule from their peers and superiors alike. Marcus had failed that test spectacularly just 3 months ago during the annual royal assessment. Standing before King Edmund and the entire court, he had drawn his bow with trembling hands. The first arrow sailed wide, embedding itself in a hay bale 20 feet from the target. The second arrow barely reached the target's outer ring. By the third attempt, nervous laughter rippled through the crowd of nobles and fellow guards. Captain Roderick, a stern man with a gray beard and piercing blue eyes, had shaken his head in disappointment. The other guards exchanged knowing glances and whispered jokes behind cupped hands. Some even questioned how Marcus had maintained his position for so long without proper skills. The shame burned in Marcus's chest like a physical wound, but he accepted their judgment without protest. What they didn't know was that Marcus had been secretly training the kingdom's most promising archers for over 15 years. In the early morning hours before the castle stirred to life, he would meet selected soldiers in a secluded grove beyond the main gates. There, away from prying eyes and harsh judgment, he would share techniques that had been passed down through generations of master archers. Young William, now considered the finest marksman in the entire royal army, had been one of Marcus's first students. The boy had arrived at the castle as a clumsy farm lad who could barely string a bow properly. Under Marcus's patient guidance, he had transformed into a warrior capable of splitting arrows at impossible distances. Yet William believed his skills came from natural talent and the standard training provided by the official instructors. Sarah, the only female archer in the royal guard, owed her legendary accuracy to countless hours spent learning Marcus's breathing techniques and stance corrections. She could now thread arrows through wedding rings while blindfolded, a feat that earned her fame throughout the kingdom. But she credited her success to her own determination and the encouragement of her fellow soldiers. The truth was that Marcus suffered from a condition that caused his hands to shake uncontrollably whenever he felt observed or judged. The tremors had begun appearing during his 4th decade of life, growing worse each year. In private, his aim remained as deadly as ever. He could still place 10 arrows in a circle smaller than a gold coin from distances that would challenge master hunters. But the moment others watched him perform, his nervous system betrayed him completely. Dr. Elizabeth, the castle's physician, had explained that some people develop such reactions to pressure and scrutiny. She had offered various treatments, but none provided lasting relief. Marcus had learned to live with his condition, finding ways to contribute to the kingdom's defense without drawing attention to his struggles. He took pride in seeing his secret students excel, even though he could never claim credit for their achievements. The morning training session continued around him as Marcus remembered the disappointed faces from his recent evaluation. Captain Roderick had suggested that perhaps Marcus should consider transitioning to different duties within the castle. The other guards had stopped including him in their archery competitions and discussions about technique. He had become invisible, just another aging soldier whose best days were behind him. But as Marcus watched the young archers practice, he noticed subtle improvements in their form that he had taught them in secret. William's follow-through had become more consistent. Sarah's grip showed the refinements they had worked on just last week. Thomas, a newer recruit, was finally keeping his elbow, properly aligned as Marcus had demonstrated during their private sessions in the grove. A small smile crossed Marcus's face as he realized that his true legacy lived on in their successes, While the kingdom might never recognize his contributions, he had helped forge the finest group of archers Aldemir had ever known. Their skills would protect the realm long after his own abilities had faded completely. The jeers and whispers hurt, but they could not diminish the quiet satisfaction he felt watching his students excel. As the morning training session ended, Marcus quietly gathered his equipment and prepared for another day of being overlooked and underestimated. He had grown accustomed to the role of the failed guard, the one whose presence served as a reminder to others about the importance of maintaining their skills. What none of them suspected was that their kingdom's greatest archery teacher walked among them every day, hidden in plain sight behind a facade of public failure and private excellence. The tavern buzzed with laughter and the clinking of metal tankards as evening settled over the castle town. Marcus sat alone in a corner booth, nursing a cup of ale while trying to ignore the conversation at the nearby table. 3 younger guards were recounting the day's training exercises, their voices growing louder with each drink. "Did you see Marcus try to demonstrate that new stance today?" laughed Jonathan, a guard barely 25 years old with sandy hair and an arrogant smirk. "I thought he was going to fall over backward when he drew the bow." "The man's a walking disaster," added Peter, shaking his head with mock sympathy. "I heard Captain Roderick is considering moving him to kitchen duty. At least there he couldn't embarrass the entire guard unit." Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to remain calm. These young men had no idea that their own improved techniques came directly from his secret teachings. Just last week he had helped Jonathan correct a flaw in his release that was causing his arrows to drift left. The improvement had been so dramatic that Jonathan now believed he had discovered the solution himself. The conversation continued as more guards joined the table, each adding their own observations about Marcus's supposed incompetence. They spoke about how he had missed an easy shot during morning practice, completely unaware that his trembling had been triggered by their watchful eyes and whispered comments. In their minds, Marcus represented everything a royal guard should not be: hesitant, inaccurate, and past his prime. What made the situation even more painful was that Marcus genuinely cared about these young soldiers. He had watched many of them arrive as nervous recruits, homesick and overwhelmed by the demands of castle life. During their secret training sessions, he had seen their personalities emerge: Jonathan's fierce determination beneath his cockiness, Peter's hidden insecurity about living up to his famous father's reputation, Sarah's quiet strength in a male-dominated environment. As the evening wore on, Marcus finished his drink and prepared to leave. Tomorrow would bring another day of public struggles and private victories. He had learned to find purpose in his hidden role, even when the weight of silence felt crushing. His reputation might be ruined, but his students' success proved that his knowledge and experience still held tremendous value. Walking back toward the castle, Marcus took a detour through the moonlit grove where he conducted his secret lessons. The targets he had set up remained hidden behind carefully arranged branches and leaves. This place had become his sanctuary, the only location where he could demonstrate his true abilities without fear of judgment or the tremors that plagued his public performances. He pulled his bow from beneath a pile of canvas and selected an arrow from his private collection. In the silver moonlight, with no audience to observe his movements, Marcus drew the string back with rock-steady hands. The arrow flew silently through the darkness, striking the center of a target 50 yards away with a satisfying thud. For the next hour, Marcus practiced the techniques he would later teach his secret students. His arrows found their marks with mechanical precision, each shot flowing naturally from his relaxed shoulders and steady breathing. This was the Marcus that few would ever see, a master archer, whose skills had been honed through decades of dedicated practice and study. The contrast between his private excellence and public failure had become his greatest burden. Every missed shot in front of the other guards felt like a betrayal of his true nature. Every joke at his expense cut deeply because he knew how easily he could silence his critics if only his condition would allow him to perform under pressure. But Marcus had learned to find meaning in his unusual circumstances. The young archers who came to him for secret training received not just technical instruction, but wisdom that could only come from someone who had experienced both triumph and humiliation. He taught them about mental preparation, about finding inner calm despite external chaos, and about the importance of persistence when faced with seemingly impossible challenges. His most recent student, Elena had sought him out after struggling with stage fright during official training sessions. Like Marcus, she performed beautifully during private practice but fell apart when others watched. Through patient work in the hidden grove, Marcus had helped her develop coping strategies that allowed her natural talent to shine through even under scrutiny. "The arrow knows where to go," he had told her during their last session. "Your job is simply to get out of its way. When the mind becomes quiet, the body remembers what it has learned." Elena had taken those words to heart, and her recent performances had impressed even Captain Roderick. She now ranked among the top 5 archers in the entire guard unit, yet she never mentioned the source of her improvement. Marcus had sworn all his students to secrecy, explaining that their training methods were unconventional and might not be understood by the official instructors. As Marcus prepared to leave the grove, he heard footsteps approaching through the darkness. His heart raced as he quickly concealed his bow and arrows beneath their hiding place. If someone discovered his secret training ground, questions would inevitably arise about his true abilities. The careful balance he had maintained for so many years could crumble in a single moment. The footsteps grew closer, and Marcus pressed himself against a large oak tree, hoping the shadows would conceal his presence. Through the darkness, he could make out a familiar silhouette moving cautiously between the trees. It was Sarah, one of his most accomplished secret students, and she appeared to be carrying her own bow and quiver. Marcus remained motionless as Sarah approached the hidden targets. She had obviously discovered his training area during one of her own late-night practice sessions. For several minutes, she stood silently among the trees, perhaps trying to understand who had created this elaborate setup and why it had been concealed so carefully from the rest of the castle community. Finally, Sarah called softly into the darkness, "I know someone is here. I've seen the fresh arrow marks on these targets for weeks now. Whoever you are, your shooting is incredible. I've never seen such precise groupings, even from our best archers." Marcus faced a moment of decision that would change everything. He could remain hidden and preserve his secret, or he could step forward and trust Sarah with the truth about his double life. The weight of years spent in isolation suddenly felt overwhelming, and the prospect of having at least one person understand his real situation seemed worth almost any risk. Marcus stepped out from behind the oak tree, his heart pounding as he revealed himself to Sarah. In the moonlight, he could see her eyes widen with surprise and confusion. Of all the people who might have discovered his secret training ground, Sarah was perhaps the most perceptive. She had always been observant during their hidden lessons, asking thoughtful questions and connecting techniques to broader principles. "Marcus," Sarah's voice carried a mixture of shock and curiosity. "I don't understand. What are you doing here? These targets, this setup, did you create all of this?" For a long moment, Marcus remained silent, weighing his options. Sarah had been one of his most dedicated secret students, though she had never realized the true identity of her instructor. He had always met his students in different locations, using various disguises and meeting them individually to maintain the secrecy of his teaching methods. "I've been coming here for years," Marcus finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is where I can practice without anyone watching, without the pressure that makes my hands shake during official training sessions." Sarah moved closer, studying Marcus's face in the pale light. "Your hands shake because people are watching? But that doesn't explain these arrow groupings. Whoever shot these arrows is incredibly skilled, more skilled than anyone in our current unit." Marcus walked over to his concealed bow and retrieved it from its hiding place. Sarah gasped as she recognized the weapon. It was clearly crafted by a master bowyer, with intricate carvings and perfect balance that spoke of both quality and extensive use. This was not the bow of a failed archer, but the tool of someone who had dedicated their life to the craft. "I have a condition," Marcus explained, stringing his bow with practiced ease. "When people observe me, when I feel judged or evaluated, my nervous system betrays me. My hands shake, my breathing becomes irregular, and I cannot perform even the simplest shots. But when I'm alone, when there's no pressure or expectation, I can still shoot as well as I ever could." To demonstrate his point, Marcus selected an arrow and drew his bow. His movements were fluid and confident, showing none of the hesitation that characterized his public performances. The arrow flew straight and true, striking the center of a distant target with a solid thud. Sarah watched in amazement as Marcus quickly shot 5 more arrows, each one grouping tightly around the first. "I don't understand," Sarah said, shaking her head. If you can shoot like that, why do you let everyone believe you're incompetent? Why endure the ridicule and jokes when you could easily prove them wrong? Marcus lowered his bow and looked directly into Sarah's eyes. Because the moment I try to prove myself in front of others, the trembling returns. I've tried countless times to overcome it, but the condition only worsens under pressure. So I've learned to find other ways to contribute to our kingdom's defense. He paused, then made a decision that would change both their lives. Sarah, I need to tell you something that might sound impossible. For the past 15 years, I've been secretly training the most promising archers in our unit. The techniques you've learned, the improvements in your accuracy and consistency, they didn't come from the official instructors or from natural talent alone. Sarah stared at Marcus in disbelief. That's impossible. My archery instructor has always been... She stopped mid-sentence as memories began clicking into place. The mysterious figure who had approached her during early morning practice sessions. The hooded mentor who had taught her breathing techniques in secluded locations around the castle grounds. The patient teacher who had corrected her stance and grip during private lessons she had assumed were dreams or hallucinations brought on by exhaustion. The grove behind the old mill, Sarah whispered. The meadow near the eastern tower. The clearing by the river. You were there at all those places, weren't you? You were the one who taught me how to find my center, how to release without thinking, how to trust my instincts instead of overthinking every shot. Marcus nodded slowly. I've trained William, Thomas, Elena, Jonathan, Peter, and dozens of others over the years. Each of them believes their improvements came from their own efforts or from the standard training program. I've been careful to ensure they never realized they were receiving instruction from the same person they mock during official practice sessions. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Every achievement she had celebrated, every moment of pride in her growing skills, had been built upon teachings from the man her fellow guards dismissed as a failure. The irony was almost too painful to comprehend. The kingdom's most ridiculed archer was actually responsible for training its most celebrated marksman. Why? Sarah asked, her voice filled with emotion. Why sacrifice your reputation to help others succeed? Why endure the humiliation when you could have found ways to teach publicly, perhaps as an official instructor? Marcus sat down on a fallen log, gesturing for Sarah to join him. Because my condition makes public teaching impossible. The moment I try to demonstrate techniques in front of a group, the trembling begins. But more importantly, I've discovered that some lessons can only be learned away from the pressure and competition of official training. When students work with me in private, they focus on understanding rather than impressing others. He looked up at the stars filtering through the tree branches above them. Besides, I found a different kind of satisfaction in this role. When I see William make an impossible shot or watch you thread arrows through tiny openings, I know that my knowledge lives on. My legacy isn't in my own achievements anymore. It's in the skills I've passed on to the next generation. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she fully grasped the sacrifice Marcus had made. But the other guards, the things they say about you, the way they treat you, doesn't that hurt? Don't you want them to know the truth? Marcus smiled sadly. Of course it hurts. Every joke, every dismissive comment, every look of pity cuts deeply. But revealing the truth would mean admitting that I've been conducting unauthorized training sessions. It would raise questions about why the official instructors weren't achieving the same results. It might even lead to my students being punished for receiving outside instruction. The weight of Marcus's secret had grown heavier with each passing year. Now, sharing it with Sarah provided both relief and additional burden. She was the first person to understand the full scope of his situation. But her knowledge also made her complicit in maintaining the deception that protected both Marcus and his students. As they sat in comfortable silence, both understanding that their relationship had fundamentally changed, Sarah began to see Marcus not as the failed guard she had pitied, but as the master archer who had shaped her entire approach to the craft. The man who trembled during public demonstrations was the same person who had patiently guided her through thousands of practice shots in hidden locations around the castle grounds. What happens now? Sarah finally asked. Now that I know the truth, what changes? Marcus studied Sarah's face carefully, understanding that her question carried enormous weight for both of them. The secret he had guarded for 15 years now rested in the hands of someone who had every reason to expose him. Sarah was respected among the guards, trusted by Captain Roderick and known for her integrity. Her word would carry significant influence if she chose to reveal what she had discovered. That depends entirely on you, Marcus replied honestly. I won't ask you to keep this secret if doing so conflicts with your principles, but I hope you'll consider the consequences before making any decisions. My students, your fellow guards, have built their confidence and reputations on skills they believe they developed independently. Learning the truth might shake their self-belief in ways that could affect their performance. Sarah stood up and walked to the nearest target, examining the tight cluster of arrows Marcus had placed there minutes earlier. Each arrow had struck within a circle no larger than a child's fist, demonstrating accuracy that surpassed even the kingdom's legendary champions. The evidence of Marcus's true abilities was undeniable, yet she understood why he had chosen to hide these skills rather than fight against his condition in public. I need time to think about this, Sarah said finally, but I won't betray your trust. Whatever I decide, I'll discuss it with you first. Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself observing Marcus with completely different eyes. During official training sessions, she watched him struggle with shots that she now knew he could make effortlessly in private. She noticed how he positioned himself where he could observe other archers without drawing attention to his analysis of their techniques. She saw him wince slightly when guards made jokes about his supposed incompetence, understanding now that each comment cut deeper than anyone realized. More significantly, Sarah began recognizing Marcus's influence in the shooting styles of guards throughout the unit. William's distinctive follow-through, Thomas's unique stance, Elena's breathing rhythm, all bore subtle signatures of Marcus's teaching methods. The realization that nearly every successful archer in the Royal Guard owed their skills to secret lessons from the man they openly mocked created a cognitive dissonance that Sarah struggled to process. During this period of observation and reflection, an event occurred that would test everyone's assumptions about Marcus's abilities. A messenger arrived at the castle bearing urgent news from the northern border. A band of raiders had been spotted approaching through the mountain passes, and early reports suggested they included skilled archers among their numbers. Captain Roderick immediately began organizing the defensive response, selecting the unit's best marksmen for strategic positions along the castle walls and towers. As expected, William, Sarah, Thomas, and Elena were among those chosen for archer duty. Marcus, predictably, was assigned to support roles that would keep him away from critical shooting positions. We can't afford any mistakes, Captain Roderick announced during the tactical briefing. These raiders are known for their ability to strike from extreme distances. Our archers will need to be perfect. Every shot must count. As the guards prepared their equipment and took their positions, Sarah found herself stationed on the eastern tower, alongside 3 other elite archers. From her vantage point, she could see Marcus helping to distribute arrows and maintain communication between different sections of the defense. Even in this crisis, he was relegated to secondary duties while the archers he had secretly trained prepared to defend the kingdom. The raiders appeared at dawn, moving cautiously through the forest that bordered the castle grounds. Their leader, a tall man with a distinctive feathered hat, carried a bow that looked both exotic and deadly. As the attacking force spread out to test the castle's defenses, it became clear that the initial reports had understated their archery skills. The first exchange of arrows revealed the raiders' tactical sophistication. They moved in coordinated patterns, using natural cover effectively while maintaining pressure on multiple sections of the castle walls. Several of their shots came dangerously close to finding gaps in the defenders' positions, demonstrating accuracy that matched or exceeded that of the Royal Guard. William, positioned on the western tower, managed to eliminate 2 raiders with precise shots, but his third arrow went wide as enemy fire forced him to take cover. Thomas, despite his usual confidence, struggled to adjust for the wind conditions that seemed to favor the attackers. Even Elena, normally steady under pressure, found herself missing shots that should have been routine. The battle continued for several hours, with neither side gaining a decisive advantage. The raiders' leader proved particularly elusive, using his superior archery skills to suppress entire sections of the castle's defenses, while his followers advanced to better positions. Captain Roderick's face grew increasingly grim as he realized that his carefully selected archers were being outmatched by their opponents. During a brief lull in the fighting, Sarah noticed Marcus observing the battle from a supply station near the base of the eastern tower. His expression showed intense concentration, as he studied the raiders' movements and shooting patterns. She could see him analyzing angles, calculating distances, and evaluating tactical situations with the expertise of someone who understood archery at the deepest level. "The wind is shifting every few minutes," Marcus called up to Sarah and the other tower archers. "Watch the trees on the ridge. They'll tell you when the gusts are coming. Aim slightly left to compensate, and time your shots for the calm periods between the wind changes." His advice proved immediately valuable. Sarah adjusted her technique accordingly and managed to hit a raider who had been giving them trouble for the past hour. The other archers followed suit and their accuracy improved noticeably. But Marcus's guidance raised questions among some of the guards who wondered how someone with his reputation could offer such insightful tactical advice. As afternoon approached, the situation grew more desperate. The raiders' leader had positioned himself in a location that provided excellent cover, while allowing him to threaten multiple areas of the castle's defenses. His shots were disrupting coordination among the royal guard, and several defenders had been wounded by his precise fire. "Someone needs to take out their leader," Captain Roderick declared during a hurried strategy meeting. "But he's positioned himself perfectly. It would take an impossible shot to reach him from any of our current positions." Sarah looked down at Marcus, who was still observing from his support station. She knew exactly who could make that impossible shot, but she also understood that revealing Marcus's abilities would expose the secret that had protected both him and his students for so many years. The kingdom's safety now hung in the balance, forcing Sarah to confront a decision she had hoped to avoid. The mile-wide weight of her knowledge pressed down on her as she realized that the man everyone dismissed as incompetent might be the only person capable of saving them all. Sarah watched the raider leader loose another arrow that forced Captain Roderick to duck behind the stone battlements. The man's position was nearly impossible to assault directly, and his shooting was so accurate that he could suppress multiple defenders simultaneously. Each passing minute allowed the rest of his band to advance closer to the castle walls, and Sarah could see the growing concern in her fellow guards' faces. Making a decision that would change everything, Sarah climbed down from the eastern tower and approached Marcus at his supply station. Her heart raced as she prepared to reveal his secret, but the kingdom's safety outweighed her promise to maintain his privacy. "Marcus," she said quietly, ensuring that no other guards could overhear their conversation, "that raider leader is positioned behind the fallen log near the lightning-struck pine. Range is approximately 150 yards with irregular wind patterns and partial cover. You could make that shot?" Marcus looked at Sarah with surprise and understanding. She was asking him to reveal his true abilities in front of the entire castle garrison, knowing that such exposure would end the careful deception he had maintained for 15 years. The trembling in his hands would almost certainly return the moment he stepped into public view with a bow. But the alternative was watching his fellow guards fall to an enemy he knew he could defeat. "Sarah, you know what happens when I try to perform in front of others?" Marcus replied, his voice filled with conflict. "My condition hasn't improved. If anything, it's gotten worse over the years. I could miss completely and make the situation even more dangerous." "But you're the only one who can make that shot," Sarah insisted. "William has tried 3 times from different angles. Thomas can't adjust for the wind patterns. Elena is too far away to get the right trajectory. The raider is using tactics that our official instructors never taught us how to counter. But you understand them because you've studied archery your entire life." Before Marcus could respond, another crisis developed. The raider leader had spotted a weakness in the southern wall's defenses and was directing concentrated fire toward a position where several young guards were trapped without adequate cover. Among them was Jonathan, the cocky archer who had mocked Marcus just days earlier in the tavern. "Jonathan's in trouble," Sarah said urgently. "He and 2 others are pinned down, and that raider is moving to get a clear shot at them. Marcus, people are going to die if something doesn't change quickly." Marcus closed his eyes and took several deep breaths, struggling with the most difficult decision of his life. Everything he had worked to protect, his students' confidence, his own privacy, the delicate balance he had created, would be destroyed if he stepped forward. But watching his secret pupils face mortal danger from an enemy he could neutralize felt like a betrayal of everything he had taught them about courage and sacrifice. "If I do this," Marcus said finally, "promise me something. Whatever happens afterward, whatever questions arise, protect the others. Don't let them know about the secret training. Let them keep believing in their own abilities. Sarah nodded solemnly. I promise. Your students deserve to maintain their confidence, regardless of what people learn about you. Marcus walked to the armory and selected his personal bow, the masterwork weapon he had hidden from public view for so many years. As he strung the bow and tested its balance, several guards noticed his movements and began whispering among themselves. The sight of Marcus preparing for combat was so unexpected that word quickly spread throughout the defensive positions. Captain Roderick appeared at Marcus's side, his expression mixing confusion with desperate hope. Marcus, what are you doing? This isn't the time for unnecessary risks. We need all our people in safe positions. Captain, Marcus replied steadily. I'm going to try something that might help Jonathan and the others. I know this seems unlikely given my performance record, but please trust me for just a few minutes. The trembling began almost immediately, as Marcus became aware of the dozens of eyes watching his every movement. His hands shook as he selected an arrow, and his breathing became irregular as whispers spread throughout the castle grounds. This was exactly what he had feared, the crushing pressure of public scrutiny that transformed him from master archer into struggling amateur. But as Marcus looked toward the southern wall where Jonathan and his companions faced mortal danger, he found a focus that transcended his personal fears. These were not just fellow guards in trouble. They were students he had secretly trained and guided. Their survival mattered more than his reputation or comfort. Drawing on techniques he had developed during decades of private practice, Marcus began the mental preparation that allowed him to shoot accurately despite his condition. He closed his eyes and visualized the shot trajectory, accounting for wind patterns, distance, and the raider's movement tendencies. Most importantly, he shifted his focus away from the watching crowd and toward the technical challenge before him. When Marcus opened his eyes and raised his bow, the trembling had not completely disappeared, but it had diminished to manageable levels. He could feel the stares of every person in the castle, could hear their shocked whispers and confused murmurs, but he forced himself to concentrate solely on the shot that could save his students' lives. The raider leader had moved into an aggressive position, preparing to eliminate the trapped guards with a series of rapid shots. His bow was drawn, his arrow aimed directly at Jonathan's exposed position. In seconds, the young guard who had mocked Marcus's abilities would be dead, killed while Marcus watched from safety. Taking one final breath, Marcus drew his bowstring to full extension. The familiar weight of a perfectly balanced arrow rested against his fingers, as muscle memory from thousands of practice sessions guided his movements. For a brief moment, the watching crowd, his trembling hands, and his years of public humiliation faded away. There was only the archer, his weapon, and the target that needed to be eliminated. The arrow flew true and straight, covering the 150 yards to its target in less than 2 seconds. It struck the raider leader in the center of his chest, spinning him around and sending his own arrow harmlessly into the dirt. The man collapsed immediately, his bow falling from nerveless fingers as his followers stared in shock at this unexpected turn in the battle. A moment of complete silence fell over the castle grounds as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. Marcus, the guard they had dismissed as hopeless, had just made one of the most difficult shots any of them had ever seen. The silence that followed Marcus's incredible shot lasted only moments before chaos erupted throughout the castle grounds. Guards who had witnessed the impossible accuracy began shouting questions and exclamations, while those who had missed the shot demanded explanations from their companions. Captain Roderick stood motionless, staring at the fallen raider leader with his mouth hanging open in disbelief. The remaining raiders, demoralized by the sudden loss of their skilled leader, began retreating toward the forest. Without their primary archer to provide cover and tactical guidance, their coordinated attack fell apart rapidly. Several guards took advantage of the confusion to pick off stragglers, but most of the enemy force managed to escape back into the mountain passes from which they had emerged. Marcus lowered his bow with trembling hands, the familiar shakiness returning now that the immediate crisis had passed. The weight of dozens of stares pressed down on him as fellow guards approached with expressions ranging from amazement to suspicion. He had saved lives with his shot, but he had also destroyed the carefully constructed facade that had protected him for years. Marcus, Captain Roderick said slowly, his voice filled with confusion, I need you to explain what just happened. That shot was impossible for someone of your demonstrated skill level. The distance, the wind conditions, the target's cover. Our best archers have been trying to make that shot for hours." Before Marcus could respond, Jonathan approached from the southern wall where he had been trapped by enemy fire. His face showed a mixture of gratitude and bewilderment as he struggled to reconcile what he had witnessed with everything he believed about Marcus's abilities. "You saved my life," Jonathan said simply. "I don't understand how, but that arrow came from exactly the right angle at exactly the right moment. If you hadn't taken that shot when you did, I'd be dead right now." Similar sentiments echoed from other guards who had been pinned down by the raider leader's accurate fire. Thomas, Elena, and William gathered around Marcus, all of them asking the same fundamental question. How had the unit's most incompetent archer suddenly demonstrated skills that surpassed their own abilities? Marcus felt the weight of their stares and questions triggering the familiar trembling that had plagued him for years. His condition was reasserting itself now that the life-threatening emergency had passed, making it difficult for him to speak coherently or maintain steady hands. The irony was not lost on him. Having proven his abilities beyond doubt, he was once again becoming the shaking, uncertain figure they had always known. Marcus began, then stopped as his voice wavered. "Sometimes in extreme situations people can exceed their normal limitations." Captain Roderick frowned at this explanation. "Marcus, that wasn't just exceeding limitations. That was the work of a master archer. The precision, the timing, the understanding of wind patterns and trajectory. Those skills take decades to develop. You don't acquire that level of expertise by accident during a moment of crisis." Sarah watched the confrontation unfold, torn between her promise to protect Marcus's secret and her desire to defend him from the growing suspicion in her fellow guards' voices. She could see that Marcus was struggling with the attention, his condition making it nearly impossible for him to provide convincing explanations for his sudden display of skill. "Perhaps we should focus on celebrating our victory rather than questioning it," Sarah suggested diplomatically. "The raiders are gone, no one was seriously injured, and Marcus made the shot when it mattered most. Isn't that what really counts?" But William stepped forward, his expression thoughtful rather than accusatory. "Captain, I've been thinking about something strange I noticed during the battle. Marcus gave us advice about the wind patterns that proved incredibly accurate. He understood things about the raiders' tactics that none of us had recognized. Either he's been hiding his knowledge for years, or something else is going on here." The circle of guards around Marcus grew larger, as word of his impossible shot spread throughout the castle. Servants, kitchen staff, and even some nobles who had witnessed the battle from the upper windows came to see the man who had somehow transformed from failure to hero in a single moment. Marcus felt his breathing becoming shallow as the crowd pressed closer. The trembling in his hands intensified, and sweat began forming on his forehead despite the cool afternoon air. This was exactly the situation he had spent 15 years avoiding, being the center of attention, facing questions about his abilities, dealing with the pressure of expectations he knew he could not meet consistently. "Please," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely audible above the murmur of conversations around him. "I just want to return to my normal duties. The crisis is over. There's no need for all this attention." But Captain Roderick was not willing to let the matter drop. "Marcus, I've been your commanding officer for 8 years. I've seen you struggle with basic shots that recruits master in their first week of training. Today you made a shot that I'm not sure I could make under perfect conditions. Something doesn't add up, and I need to understand what's really going on." The captain's words triggered a flood of memories and observations from other guards. Thomas mentioned seeing Marcus provide tactical advice that proved remarkably insightful. Elena recalled moments when Marcus had seemed to anticipate enemy movements with uncanny accuracy. Even Peter, who had been among the cruelest in his mockery of Marcus's public failures, admitted that he had sometimes noticed flashes of deeper knowledge in the older guard's comments. As the interrogation intensified, Marcus felt his world collapsing around him. The secret he had guarded so carefully was unraveling before his eyes, and the protective isolation he had maintained was being stripped away by well-meaning colleagues who could not understand the complexity of his situation. "I think," said a new voice from the back of the crowd, "that perhaps Marcus has been teaching all of you more than you realize." Everyone turned to see who had spoken, and Marcus's heart sank as he recognized Dr. Elizabeth, the castle's physician. She had been observing the confrontation from a distance, and her medical training had apparently allowed her to piece together elements of the situation that others had missed. Dr. Elizabeth stepped forward, her calm demeanor commanding attention from the assembled guards. I've treated Marcus for a condition that causes severe trembling when he feels observed or judged. It's a real medical issue that affects some people as they age, but I've also noticed that many of you have developed shooting techniques that seem remarkably sophisticated for guards trained only through our standard program. The physician's words created a moment of stunned silence as the implications sank in. Sarah felt her promise to Marcus weighing heavily as she realized that the truth was emerging, whether they wanted it to or not. Captain Roderick looked from Marcus to Dr. Elizabeth and back again. Are you suggesting that Marcus has been providing training to our guards despite his apparent inability to demonstrate these skills publicly? Before Dr. Elizabeth could respond, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. The secret was already emerging, and continuing to deny it would only make the situation worse for everyone involved. His students deserved to understand the truth about their training, and he deserved to stop living the exhausting double life that had defined his existence for so many years. Yes, Marcus said quietly, his voice gaining strength as he accepted the inevitable. I've been teaching archery in private for 15 years. The trembling you see is real. It happens whenever I feel watched or judged. But when I'm alone with a student, when there's no pressure or expectation, I can still teach everything I learned during 30 years of dedicated practice. The revelation hit the assembled guards like a physical blow, creating a stunned silence that stretched for several heartbeats before erupting into a cacophony of questions, exclamations, and heated discussions. The aftermath of Marcus's confession created a whirlwind of emotions and revelations that swept through the castle grounds like wildfire. Guards who had mocked his abilities for years suddenly found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about their own skills and achievements. The comfortable assumptions that had defined their professional relationships crumbled as the truth about Marcus's secret teaching emerged piece by piece. William was among the first to fully grasp the implications of the revelation, as he recalled countless small moments over the years, subtle advice offered during training, corrections suggested in passing, techniques that had seemed to develop naturally, but now appeared deliberately guided. A picture emerged of systematic instruction that had been invisible precisely because it was so skillfully concealed. The breathing technique you taught me, William said slowly, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. The way you showed me how to find my center before each shot. That wasn't standard training, was it? That was you working with me privately, helping me develop skills I thought came from natural talent. Marcus nodded, relief and apprehension mixing in his expression, as years of secrecy finally came to light. You came to me as a farm boy who had never held a proper bow. Your natural coordination was excellent, but you needed guidance to channel that ability effectively. We worked together for 3 years before you felt confident enough to compete with the other guards. Similar realizations spread through the crowd as other guards began connecting memories of mysterious encounters with hooded figures, unexplained improvements in their accuracy, and moments when they had received advice that seemed to come from nowhere. Thomas remembered late-night practice sessions with a patient instructor who had helped him overcome his tendency to rush his shots. Elena recalled learning breathing techniques from someone who understood the unique challenges faced by smaller archers trying to draw heavy war bows. Captain Roderick stood in the center of the growing chaos, his military mind struggling to process the administrative and tactical implications of what he was learning. Marcus, are you telling me that nearly every archer in our unit has received unauthorized private instruction? That our most successful guards owe their skills to training methods that were never approved or documented? The methods I used weren't unauthorized, Marcus replied carefully. They were simply additional to the official training program. I never contradicted the instruction provided by our regular teachers. I only offered supplementary guidance to help individual students overcome specific challenges or develop their natural abilities more fully. Dr. Elizabeth stepped forward to provide medical context for the situation. Captain, I need you to understand that Marcus's condition is real and debilitating. He experiences severe anxiety responses when asked to perform under observation, which triggers physical symptoms that make accurate shooting nearly impossible. This isn't a matter of confidence or practice, and it's a genuine neurological reaction that he cannot simply overcome through willpower. The physician's explanation helped some guards understand why Marcus had chosen secrecy over recognition, but it also raised new questions about the ethics and effectiveness of his teaching methods. If he could provide such excellent instruction in private, why hadn't the castle found ways to accommodate his condition and utilize his knowledge officially? Sarah found herself in the unique position of having known about Marcus's situation before the revelation, which gave her insights that proved valuable in helping others process the information. "I think what Marcus created was something that our official training program was missing," she said thoughtfully. "Individual attention, personalized instruction, and the time to work through specific problems without the pressure of group evaluation." As the initial shock began to fade, a new dynamic emerged within the guard unit. Some members expressed gratitude for the secret instruction they now realized they had received, while others felt manipulated or deceived by the hidden nature of their training. Jonathan, whose life had been saved by Marcus's incredible shot, struggled with conflicting emotions about owing his skills and possibly his survival to someone he had openly ridiculed. "I don't know how to feel about this," Jonathan admitted to the group. "On one hand, you saved my life today and apparently helped me become a better archer. On the other hand, you let me and others mock you for years while knowing you were actually responsible for our success. Why didn't you ever defend yourself or claim credit for what you had accomplished?" Marcus considered the question carefully before responding. "Because claiming credit would have required revealing the extent of my private teaching, which could have caused problems for my students. If the castle administration learned that guards were receiving unauthorized instruction, there might have been disciplinary action or questions about the adequacy of the official training program. I chose to protect all of you rather than defend my own reputation." This explanation resonated with many guards who realized that Marcus had sacrificed his standing within the community to shield them from potential consequences of their unconventional training. The man they had dismissed as incompetent had actually been protecting their careers and reputations at the cost of his own dignity and recognition. King Edmund himself arrived to assess the situation after hearing reports of the unusual battle and its aftermath. The monarch listened carefully as Captain Roderick explained the day's events and the revelations about Marcus's hidden role as an instructor. Rather than expressing anger about the unauthorized training, the king seemed intrigued by the results it had produced. "Let me understand this correctly," King Edmund said thoughtfully. "Our most effective archers received their training from a guard whose condition prevents him from demonstrating his skills publicly, but who possesses knowledge and teaching ability that exceeds our official instructors. And this arrangement has been producing superior results for 15 years without anyone realizing what was happening." The king's pragmatic approach to the situation surprised everyone, including Marcus. Rather than focusing on the rule-breaking or deception involved, King Edmund seemed primarily interested in the effectiveness of the unconventional training methods and their potential for broader application. "Marcus," the king continued, "I'm promoting you to Master Archer Instructor, with the responsibility of training all new recruits and working with our existing guards to further develop their skills. Dr. Elizabeth will work with you to develop training methods that accommodate your condition while allowing you to share your knowledge more openly." The promotion stunned everyone present, transforming Marcus from the unit's most ridiculed member to one of its most important figures in a single moment. The guards who had mocked him just hours earlier now found themselves reporting to him for advanced instruction, creating a complete reversal of the social dynamics that had defined their relationships for years. As the crowd gradually dispersed and normal castle routines resumed, Marcus found himself facing a future that was both exciting and terrifying. His secret was out, his skills were acknowledged, and his knowledge would finally receive the recognition it deserved. But he would also need to learn how to function in a role that required public performance and constant observation, exactly the conditions that triggered his most severe symptoms. Sarah approached him as he prepared to return his equipment to the armory. "How do you feel about all this?" she asked gently. "Your whole world just changed in the span of a few hours." Marcus smiled, an expression that combined relief, anxiety, and cautious optimism. "Terrified," he admitted honestly, "but also grateful. For 15 years I've watched my students succeed while being unable to take any pride in their achievements. Now finally, I can acknowledge my role in their development and continue helping guards reach their potential without hiding in shadows. The transformation was complete. The royal guard, who had been jeered for his failures, was now recognized as the master teacher, who had been responsible for the army's greatest successes all along. His condition remained unchanged, but his community's understanding of his situation had evolved completely. Marcus would continue to face the challenges posed by his anxiety and trembling, but he would no longer face them alone or in silence. The kingdom had learned that sometimes the greatest contributions come from the most unexpected sources, and that true expertise doesn't always manifest in the ways people expect to see it. Marcus's legacy would no longer be hidden. It would be celebrated, acknowledged, and built upon for generations of archers yet to come.